All right, everybody, welcome. We're going to get started. I'm Dawn Hawkins. I'm the CEO at the National Center on Sexual Exploitation. Welcome to a briefing that's directly addressing what's happening tomorrow before the Senate Judiciary Committee. They've called 5 big tech CEOs to come account for the immense harm that many children have faced on their platforms. It's been incredible this weekend to see Washington, D.C. just flooded with ads. I've been seeing ads from TikTok all over the metro, ads from Apple, Google, Meta, all of them. And it's interesting to me because most of the ads are saying that these tech companies are partnering with Congress to help parents. It's very ironic language that we're hearing from them. And it's a little bit too late. There's evidence, particularly, that Meta is determined to resist accountability. Their proposal ignores the extensive evidence of design flaws. We have Tim Estes with us today on this first panel to talk about that. We have harm happening to teens who are 16 and 17. We have John here to talk about that. Meta's newest announcements, it's only for kids 15 and under in the U.S. So why are we only caring about the younger teenagers? And really, the onus can't be on parents alone. So many kids don't have device supervision, and us as parents it's so hard to keep up. And we've got Melissa McKay here to talk us through that. So I'm going to just introduce them. Tim Estes is a tech innovator who designed tools used by the intelligence community, banks nationwide, and law enforcement. He's also the CEO and founder of Angel AI. I'm here with John DeMay, who's a small businessman, a former police officer from Michigan, who lost his 17-year-old son to suicide in 2022 after he met predators on Instagram. And Melissa McKay is a mother from Utah whose research has unveiled immense corruption across these platforms and whose own children and other kids connected to her have been impacted as well. So I'm going to hand it over to you, Tim, and then John, and then Melissa. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for having me. It is a pretty important week. Tomorrow, we'll see the CEOs of companies that represent literally hundreds of millions of kids online come before Congress and have to answer questions around why they designed their systems in such a way that so much harms could happen. And if this were a different industry, like the airline industry, this would be like the CEO of Boeing showing up in front of Congress and explaining why it was okay when one plane fell out of the sky every week, because the scale of harms are nearly equivalent. So what we are seeing now is the beginning, I hope, of the end of the self-regulation canard of the last decade. Speaking as somebody who has been engaged in this area for some time, particularly in the area of looking at some of the harms that have been online. My former company, we collaborated very closely with Thorn in building out the Spotlight system that some people here may have worked with, trying to rescue children out of trafficking. They've identified with Thorn about 10,000 kids in the US over the course of that system's life so far. And a few years ago, when FOSTA SESTA passed, you literally could get to children being marketed 2 clicks from Google. And it was just wrong and it was evil. And these were ads that kids often were asked or made to write by pimps to attract pedophiles who would pay more. And so we've seen this evil before. And now what we're realizing is there's a scale of evil and impact that cannot be allowed to continue as collateral damage just because the companies in question decided to build their network to maximize engagement without concerns about the ancillary costs.
Thank you. Melissa.
Great. Okay, so for those of you who don't know me, I'm a mother to 5 children and a passionate advocate. I've dedicated years to researching technology companies, striving to hold them accountable for their failings to protect children. Nearly 5 years ago, I collaborated with my senator. Is there a little bit of a lag? Is that just me? Is it okay? Okay. Anyway, is it okay, Don? I feel like there's a little lag in my voice.
Melissa, it's perfect. You can just keep going.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Anyway, nearly 5 years ago, I collaborated with my Senator, Mike Lee, and the National Center on Sexual Exploitation to get a congressional hearing called, entitled Protecting Innocence in a Digital World. This was held in July 2019. I dedicated months to posing as a child on platforms such as Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, and Twitter in order to effectively write testimony. What I found horrified me. My child accounts on Instagram were inundated by DMs from anonymous users trying to send me pornography. I saw hundreds of posts aimed at soliciting nudes for sextortion. On Snapchat, I was fed a steady stream of mature content in their Discover News section, glorifying prostitution and drug use. On TikTok, I was fed content about suicide and sex work, even when my account was in restricted mode. And on Twitter, pornography was easily visible, even when I only searched for completely innocuous topics like religion or politics. Please forgive me if I remain skeptical about big tech's willingness to change. Nearly 5 years have passed since that initial hearing, and yet there have been very few significant changes. So much of their changes have been smoke and mirrors. A major concern is the lack of sufficient information for parents about the dangers their children encounter on social media apps, primarily because of the deficient and deceptive app rating systems of Apple and Google. As a child advocates, we have endeavored to inform and caution parents about the risks associated with social media apps. However, it is important to acknowledge that this is not entirely our job. The responsibility has historically fallen on comprehensive and effective rating systems to accurately inform parents of these risks. For example, Apple classifies apps like TikTok, Snapchat, and Instagram as suitable for children aged 12 and above, and does not display any visible harmful content warnings in the screen where parents approve these apps. Parents are often criticized for not adequately protecting their children online, yet many apps misleadingly claim to be safe for children. This false labeling allows these social media platforms to evade age-based parental controls, reaching far more children and deceiving parents who trust app ratings to gauge suitability. Apple and Google are the primary gatekeepers to these dangerous apps, and they do almost nothing to stop children from accessing them or help parents remain informed about risks. Nor do they do enough to stop the dangerous proliferation of child sexual abuse material on their devices. 87% of teens own an iPhone, so this is primarily an Apple problem. Secondly, I want to focus on X, formerly known as Twitter. My own son recently came to me and told me he'd been exposed to explicit content on X. As I fumbled with his iPhone trying to figure out what I had missed, I realized that Twitter.com, X.com, and Reddit.com are not included in the standard library of restricted URLs. So parents must go in and manually add these websites in order to protect their children. Most parents do not understand this. A recent survey by the Children's Commissioner for England revealed that X, or Twitter, is the platform where the largest percentage of children reported encountering pornography. Specifically, 41% of young people indicated they had seen pornography on Twitter, surpassing the 37% who had encountered it on dedicated pornography websites. Currently, X claims in the Apple App Store that it has infrequent or mild sexual content, nudity, profanity, and crude humor. This is an obvious deception. In conclusion, as tech companies may continue to blame parents for safety issues, we must demand transparent and precise ratings and content descriptors that reflect platform risks accurately. App stores should adopt a rating system similar to the ESRB the Entertainment Software Ratings Board, used for video games, and ensure parents receive comprehensive information for better risk management and parental controls. We must also ensure that Apple and Google prevent children from accessing apps containing pornographic content, such as X and Reddit. This can be easily achieved through device-level age verification and default safety settings based on the age provided in the Apple or Google ID. If you go straight to the gatekeepers, which are Apple and Google, these enormous problems could be more easily solved with a few adjustments. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. John?
Yeah, good morning. Or good afternoon. No, good morning. Yeah, good afternoon. Yeah.
It's afternoon now.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This is I'm so humbled to be here, and there's so many folks watching. Some watching I've probably spoke with, interviewed with. Some know who I am. My name is John DeMay. My son Jordan DeMay was shot himself in March of 2022. I found him in his bedroom Friday morning in his bedroom. We were poised to leave for a 2-week Florida vacation that morning, and we later found out that he was being sextorted online by what ultimately turned out to be 6 Nigerian men. My home is locked. My home is secure, and Instagram allowed 6 Nigerian men to come into my home at 3 o'clock in the morning and murder my son. And those perpetrators continued to use that platform even after our incident to continue to victimize other people. We are very fortunate. Our FBI team have made arrests, and we have 2 extraditions that are here in Michigan and waiting 1. So we have folks that are going to be on trial, hopefully, and hopefully soon in the spring here. But Jordan was an amazing man. He was 6 weeks away from his 18th birthday and graduating high school. He was well-liked. He was respected. He was an amazing athlete. Honor roll student, all-conference basketball player, football player. He had the world was his oyster, and he was cut short because of social media. And I'm not the only person. I just happen to be the voice today, right now, in front of these folks that are listening. There's other families that are out there that we're work with and talk with and text, and you know, the Woods family and the Torres family and the Montgomery family and all these other families that are out there that are dealing with this. And the FBI just released some statistics last week, and 13,000 cases, reported cases of sextortion alone, just sextortion. And if you can imagine that 13,000 cases that were actually reported, what percentage of that is actually what's happening, right? Is it 10%? Is it 2%? So that could be 100,000. It could be 200,000 just in sextortion. And sextortion is the flavor of the day, right? And that's just what's happening to our young people. There's people that are being kidnapped and sex trafficked, and the fentanyl crisis and the body shaming and all the young women that are having issues because of what's happening on social media, and they're just literally doing nothing. You know, if social media was a place, if Facebook was a place, if Instagram was an actual physical place where we could go and hang out, would any of you let your kids go there? Probably not. It would be horrible. It would be a place that you would probably never want to go there, and you wouldn't let your kids there either. And we have to do something about it. It's time. It's well overdue. There's millions and millions of crimes that are happening on social media platforms, and they're not doing anything. They're really not doing anything to stop this stuff. They're rolling out simple little foo-foo things that make people feel good, but it's not making any meaningful difference. Our group of criminals that came after my son were organized. They purchased fake and stolen accounts. Basically, there's groups of people. That's all they do is they build fake accounts and they sell them to people like our suspects that victimized my son. And there's money people that go along with it. So there's all these collaboration with all these different groups of people. And Instagram and Snapchat and all these companies are giving them a platform and a place safely to do this and effectively. Yeah. So I hope that some things do change, and I want to be the voice for the parents that can't and the parents that won't maybe, and for whatever reason, I want to be there for them, and I want to be there for my son and make sure that every tech company knows Jordan DeMay's name.
Thank
So
you.
thank you for having me.
Thank you for being with me.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, so late last week, Meta Instagram announced that they are going to, by default, stop anybody who is not already friends with you. So whether they're teens or adults from sending you private direct messages, but only for 15 and under.
Yeah, well, that doesn't help my case because my son was 6 weeks away from being 18. And Jordan was an amazing kid. And when he was younger on social media and he had a phone young, I had every app through. I got carbon copied text messages that he got. I had an app that did that. I GPS tracked him. We had Life 360. I made him sign a contract when he was 11 or 12 or whenever he got his phone that I will not talk to anybody that's not in my contacts list. I'm not going to have my phone after a certain time. I actually had a separate router in my house that was on a timer that shut off at 8 o'clock at night. And he didn't even have access to my router. So, I mean, when he was younger, we did everything you could imagine to protect him. And after a while, when he started driving, he's 17, he's an honor roll student. We were getting ready to boot him out of the house to create his adult life. And, I didn't have to worry about what he was doing on social media. I didn't think. But unfortunately, when he gets wrapped up in a situation that he wasn't mentally prepared for and couldn't handle the stress, he took his life over it. And we never got a chance to help. I saw him for the last time at 10:15 that night on Thursday night, and that was literally 2 minutes before that he got his first message from what appeared to be a nice, pretty young lady reaching out on Instagram to say hi. 5.5 hours later, he takes his own life. So that conversation turned after about midnight from a friendly relationship. He sent the photo, and then they started the extortion, and the extortion happened from about midnight until roughly 3:45 in the morning when he took his own life. So it happened for 3-4 hours, and nothing was flagged. Nothing happened, and that account continued to go on for weeks, if not months, after Jordan.
Wow.
And in our indictment that the federal government has put against these Nigerians, it's in there. There's actually another victim in there that's still alive, thank the Lord, but that victim was victimized almost identically the way Jordan was victimized days and days after Jordan.
And one other thing you were sharing with us before is that there were signs. It was, if they were checking these messages, there was clear evidence of grooming.
Yeah, and it's sad. I have not seen the full transcript, but after multiple search warrants, the FBI was able to get the full transcript of the conversation that happened. And every agent that I've talked to, every prosecutor that I've talked to said it was the most horrific, tear-jerking, emotional transcript they've ever read in their entire careers, because they knew what happened, and it was like a crazy fiction story that just played out, and they knew what the ending was going to be. And it was just so horrific how they watched them groom Jordan and pressured him and pushed him and never let him have a second to bring his thoughts together to be able to stop and think about what happened. It was just full throttle the whole time, and it's really unfortunate. It really is. And all those keywords that you said, there were so many words in there that could have been easily recognized. Technology is there. They have it at their fingertips. They're just choosing not to use it. So,
Tim, I can't see you on my screen, but if you're still there, I want to just kind of go to X, Twitter. In the last couple of days, they've made a big announcement about all the ways they care and are trying to help protect kids on their platform. And one of the things that really stood out to me was they made this comment that, our platform is used the least of all of them by kids. So, it's as though they're, saying they don't need to do anything differently because kids aren't using their platform as much. I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
Well, I mean, maybe the kids shouldn't be using the platform at all. So let's make that more true, right? I think the biggest issue here is there is these stories are just horrific and heartbreaking, and there are too many of them. And the statistics are overwhelming relative to stories like we've heard here. The thing that's so interesting is the ability for every one of these services to be able to verify the age of who is using it is now quite straightforward and quite trivial. There's multiple providers that do this. And essentially, they're the ability of the current AI tech to detect and classify all types of content, things that are explicit being sent to or from minors, is all available. but they don't have liability. I noticed in the chat there have been people ringing about suing. The bottom line is they have no liability for this based on the legal regime that has been put into place in the US. And therefore, every attempt by parents to hold them accountable at some substantial scale has failed. And so until there is liability for these things, there will be no limits. So this is not a technology problem. In fact, we were talking about Meta earlier, right? And Instagram owned by them. They're going to spend $10 billion on NVIDIA chips to build an artificial general intelligence system that they plan to open source. This is what Mark Zuckerberg talked about a week ago, and CNBC covered it, everybody else covered it. They spend less than $3 billion a year on safety. If they took 1 year to do the level of work that they put into their AI research on the kids' safety problem, this would all go away. And that sadly has been true for years. So that's the dirty little secret, is hiding behind historic limitations that are 5 or 6 or 7 years old as excuses, when it really is about not being willing to allocate the capital to fix the problem and accept the consequences to addiction that drives their engagement. Like their monetization essentially is driven by engagement, which is then powered by algorithms that drive addiction. And that's why it's gone from 2 or 3 hours a day to 4.8 hours a day for our teenagers. It's not because the content got so amazing and great, right, in the last few years. It's because it's wired and hooked them in. If they let these things be wide open and kids are on it that long, this is the consequences of it. So it's broken on multiple levels.
Thank you. We're going to move to our second panel, and I'll ask you to come back up, John, and
Sure.
Tim and Melissa afterwards, and we'll have a little bit more discussion and open it up for Q&A. So, Aaron, come join me up here. Let me see. Laura, Jay, Michael. You know, one of the excuses that we've heard consistently from these tech companies as we meet with them is that they can't make changes because it might hurt LGBTQ plus youth. And so we're here joined by many advocates to talk about those lies and those excuses. The reality is that no child should be exposed to the predatory content and actors who have access to them on these platforms. So I'm joined here today by Laura. There you are. I see you, Laura. She's an attorney at the Social Media Victims Law Center in Seattle. She's representing hundreds of victims of gross harm and preventable negligence on these platforms. And I'm here with my good friend, Aaron Crowley. He survived online sexual exploitation and is today a pastor and an author of Bought with a Price, a gay Christian's memoir from porn sets to love. Jay Banky is a child abduction and sex trafficking survivor and a human trafficking consultant for both the private and public sectors through her company, Clever Human. It's good to see you, Jay. And Michael Soto is joining us remotely. I think you're there. He's in Arizona. He's the Chief Advocacy Officer at One Community, a bipartisan coalition promoting federal LGBTQ protections in employment, housing, credit, jury service, and public accommodations. Laura, I'm going to hand it over to you, and then we'll go to you, Aaron.
Great. Thank you so much. So look, I mean, the issue here, right, is social media platforms are targeting and exploiting our kids for profit. This is not about content. It's not about censorship. It's about product designs, features, programming decisions these companies are making. And essentially, look, what they're doing is they're collecting thousands of personal data points from children, not just what these kids are doing on the platforms, but everything they're doing online, which is virtually everything these days. And then they use those data points to identify and exploit individual vulnerabilities. And as one could imagine, our LGBTQ youth are often particularly vulnerable because of the place that they're coming from. So I want to point out, so there's a couple of studies recently in 2023 that document these impacts and harms. One is there's a GLAAD 2023 Media Safety Index. There's also Fair Play out in June of 2023, how LGBTQIA plus youth are disproportionately harmed by online platform design decisions. So these types of studies, they talk about the disinformation, misinformation, hate speech, how these platforms take down and de-amplify LGBTQ content creators, right? I mean, that's a discrimination These are harms happening to the community that these platforms are causing directly, as well as our youth who are suffering addiction, exploitation, and those types of related harms at greater rates across the board. This is one of the names this is referred to would be algorithmic discrimination. And these companies know it's happening. They just don't think they have a duty to protect our kids. And so again, these are harms that are not just happening online, but they're happening as a matter of product design. SMVLC, we represent, you said hundreds a moment ago, and unfortunately, sadly, we represent thousands of families who've been harmed by social media. We are a small firm that was founded 2 years ago, and we work with families in every U.S. state, thousands of families, more calling in every day because their children have been harmed. And so it's not just these studies, but we see this evidence every day. We see it in the data. We see it in these kids' stories. And I want to just provide a couple of quick examples. I had one situation with a mom who was telling me about her 15-year-old transgender son who was really struggling. She had him in counseling, was regularly checking in, was limiting social media access. And after we were talking, I said, hey, do me a favor and go check his TikTok For You feed and record it, just a few minutes, right? Just see what these companies are choosing for your child. And I will tell you folks, and I have that video, I'm happy to provide it to people, but in the course of 60 seconds, literally 60 seconds, he was being fed suicide, transphobia, and then a Gillette Labs razor advertisement, right? So you've got these kids just being inundated with these videos that these platforms are choosing for them. We pull data every day out of these accounts, hundreds of these accounts. I have seen teenagers searching for uplifting content, literally quoting motivational speech, positive affirmations, gym motivation. I see kids searching for kid stuff like Spider-Man and BMX races. And then what they get as a matter of programming and design are suicide. Massive amounts of suicide, self-harm, depression, disordered eating. These are things that are difficult to view as an adult. I cannot imagine the impact those have on a child. And again, and importantly, not what these kids are choosing, what these platforms are choosing for them. We have LGBTQ kids who are searching for gay pride. They get homophobia and condemnation. We have LGBTQ kids, all kids searching for community, and they're being connected to predators through their user recommendation algorithms. And I urge everyone, if you have not looked at those of the Facebook documents that Frances Haugen released in late 2021 that have been published, please look at those documents. One comes to mind on this topic, which is so critical. It is a Facebook employee saying that they're people you may know, user recommendation algorithm. And this is almost a verbatim quote, folks. Historically contributed up to 75% of inappropriate adult minor contact on the platform. That's what Meta's own study has determined. Another employee weighs in and says, this is horrific. Why have we not just turned this off, at least for kids' accounts? And folks, the answer is that these platforms are getting away with it. They don't believe they have to. They don't think they have a legal duty to not affirmatively harm our children. The last thing I want to note here when we talk about COSA, the Kids Online Safety Act. COSA is not about content. It's not about censorship. None of these issues, right? Again, these are product design issues. COSA does not hold platforms liable for what a child asks to see. That's section 3B1 of COSA. It also does not prevent these platforms from using personalized recommendation systems to display content to minors as long as they're only using information like the language that's spoken, geolocation, age. That's section 4E3C. So again, please read COSA if you have any questions. You will not see big tech talking about those provisions in COSA or several others that frankly, the co-authors put in there in specific response to LGBTQ concerns. Again, this is what big tech is saying in the narrative. This is fear mongering, it's misinformation at its finest. And our kids are the ones paying the price. So we need to step up and do something about this.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you. And thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to share. I'm really thankful. Around these discussions about, online internet safety, I've been hearing some people say things like the LGBT community is trying to groom children. But as a gay man who was actually groomed, I know that narrative is dangerous because it distracts from the reality that many people experience. I was not groomed by LGBT people. I was groomed by the unsafe environment on the internet, especially online pornography. LGBT people are actually, just as many people have already said, just as Laura said, LGBT people are actually more likely to be the victims, not the perpetrators of online harassment. Because we are often ostracized by our families and our in-person communities, many LGBT youth turn to online spaces, online communities for safe spaces. But since there aren't any safeguards, this leaves LGBT kids more vulnerable to cyberbullying, exploitation, blackmail, being outed, and being exposed to explicit material. I was only 9 years old whenever I was first exposed to pornography. I didn't even know what sex was. So whenever I saw these scenes of sexual violence, I learned sex is violent. Mix that with being a gay youth, seeing people on the internet sharing these bullying narratives that LGBT people are the sexual predators and hypersexualizing us. All of that is what groomed me. It normalized sexual violence for me, so much so that whenever I was raped, I didn't even realize I was raped. A group of guys I met on social media raped me. They took pictures and shared them online. The internet taught me it was normal. And so because I thought it was normal, I didn't have a healthy way to process that trauma. Instead, I thought, if it's going to happen to me anyway, I might as well get paid for it. So when I met my pimp through social media and he gave me the opportunity to do mainstream porn, I was already groomed to say yes. And now there is explicit material of me on the internet that I do not consent to. And big tech in the porn industry are making a big profit off of it. And it is too easy, way too easy for this to happen. And I am definitely not the only LGBT person who has experienced this, as Laura said. I'm not, definitely not the only person who experienced this in their youth, as we've heard from the other people. In 2010, my friend Jane Clementi lost her son Tyler when he took his own life after a live streamed video of him being intimate with another young man was shared over his college roommate's social media platforms as a means to humiliate and bully Tyler for being gay. Like I said, this happens way too easily and too often, and we must make it harder for this to happen by passing COSA and similar bills. I understand there's been some pushback on COSA and previous versions of COSA because there were some people who say that LGBT people are groomers who threatened to use the bill against my community. So I am very thankful. I'm so thankful. Changes have been made and have been implemented to ensure this bill is not misused and weaponized against LGBT people in our online spaces. So now, what are we waiting for? We need these protections. Today, only by the grace of God, I am alive. Because like Tyler and like other people who have experienced this, I wanted to take my life as well, and I tried. But only by the grace of God, I am here today. And today, I have my own family with my husband and our 7-year-old son. My son is 2 years away from the age I was whenever I was first exposed to pornography. And that terrifies me. Because I know the internet is not set up to protect kids like my son. And I know this because I was not protected. So as a survivor, I ask you, please make it harder for big tech companies to make a profit off of anyone's sexual exploitation.
Oh, we're going to change them.
Amen.
We're doing it. Oh. Jay, I'm going to pass it over to you and then Michael.
Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Jay Benke, and I'm a child abduction and sex trafficking survivor. I'm also currently pursuing my bachelor's degree in tech because I love technology. I'm a big fan of technology. I'm also a queer person, and I'm a mother, and I'm a mother of a Black trans child. And I don't personally know what it's like to be Black in America or trans in America. I just know what it's like to love someone who has those identifications, and to want the best for them. And I wanted to express my condolences to John. I'm so sorry for your loss. And like you said, your story is not unique. And that is one of my greatest fears as a mother, because we know also that children who are sexually exploited, sexually abused, who are trafficked also have higher indicators of self-harm. And so part of protecting my child and worrying about my child included worrying about what would happen if they unfortunately were exploited online. I believe my child and all children deserve protection from predators online. What really interests me in COSA was I've been kind of tracking, since I'm a tech person, I've been tracking articles, stories about, and investigations about tech and their failures to protect our children. One piece by the New York Times from 2019 labeled "The Internet is Overrun with Images of Child Sexual Abuse. What Went Wrong?" Specifically says an investigation by the New York Times found an insatiable criminal underworld that had exploited the flaw and insufficient efforts to contain it. As with hate speech and terrorist propaganda, many tech companies failed to adequately police sexual abuse imagery on their platforms or failed to cooperate sufficiently with authorities when they found it. We know that tech companies do not have enough moderators, and also once they employ moderators, moderators are often radicalized. There's a great story, piece that was put out by The Verge, specifically on how Facebook moderators end up expressing anti-Semitism propaganda. One moderator suddenly started believing the earth was flat. People were questioning the Holocaust, and one moderator had mapped out every escape route out of his house and now sleeps with a gun and no longer believes that 9/11 was a terrorist attack. So like the idea that we're just going to add a few moderators to this and we're going to be fine, that we don't actually have to hold tech companies liable for the harms that are being inflicted on our children, especially our queer children, and the risk that they're at, is just laughable. So I absolutely support COSA. I believe that all children deserve protections, and I believe that queer children deserve those same protections.
Thank you, Jay. Michael, are you able to unmute?
I am, yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello. Thanks for having me today, everyone. It's nice to be here with y'all. And Don and Eleanor, thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this conversation. Unlike I think a lot of folks here, I'm not a parent. I'm not an expert in a lot of the things that y'all are experts in. I work in LGBTQ civil rights, and I'm a transgender man. And what I really care about is safety and well-being of LGBTQ people of all ages, including youth. And so where I kind of come to this conversation is that we know that new technology, all throughout human history, right? New technologies require new ways of balancing things like free speech and freedom of expression and regulating in terms of safety. And so I think that's kind of where we are today with social media, especially. We know that social media is very prone to misinformation, or very vulnerable, I guess, to misinformation. We've seen that from everything from anti-Semitism and the way that it spreads on the internet and through social media, to QAnon, to the January 6th insurrection, right? And so we know that there's a real need to look at the way that social media is very vulnerable to misinformation and exploiting vulnerable people. And at the end of the day, LGBTQ people of all ages are very marginalized people in this country. We experience discrimination, we experience bias, we experience violence at a far greater rate often than cisgender and heterosexual people. And so we know especially the LGBTQ youth are far more prone, vulnerable to bullying, and that's in person and online. And so these are things that we need to take into consideration. And I'm just happy to be invited to the conversation because I believe that we should be talking with everybody about LGBTQ safety and wellness. That's my job. That's what I believe in doing, and I was just happy to be invited to this conversation so that we can be a part of it, right? So that we can be a part of the solution to ensure that LGBTQ youth have the same kinds of access to community, healthy community with other LGBTQ youth, but are not disproportionately vulnerable to misinformation and to exploitation. And so I think that's really what my interest is in here. And I really hope that LGBTQ folks will engage in this conversation, because if we're not engaged, if we are not talking about ourselves as community members, for those of us that are parents, about our kids, right, or the parents of LGBTQ kids, if we're not engaged in this conversation, then we're not at the table. We're not a part of coming up with a solution that will be good for LGBTQ kids in terms of our safety and well-being. And so I just really appreciate Dawn inviting me to this conversation, doing the outreach to LGBTQ people and LGBTQ organizations so that we can help and lend our voices and our advocacy for LGBTQ kids and for everyone, in terms of making sure that the regulations are as safe as possible in terms of social media for all youth, especially for LGBTQ youth, because we know that LGBTQ youth are disproportionately marginalized. And so I'm happy to be a part of this conversation, and I hope I can lend some expertise and advocacy for LGBTQ youth, and for the safety and well-being of LGBTQ youth in general. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Michael. I'm going to invite John for you to come back up, and we'll open it up to questions. But I just want to make a couple comments. Aaron, I was just reminded of earlier. Oh, can we grab that chair?
Oh, yeah. Should I scoot over?
Yeah, unless we want to cuddle a little. Yeah. One of the big tech companies, we had a big victory with them a year, 2 years, 18 months ago or so, when they promised to stop allowing young people to send or receive pornography. Mm-hmm. And then they backed up that argument and said, well, LGBT youth need to be able to send nude images. It's the way that they explore their sexuality. It's the way that they connect with each other. And I remember talking to you about it. I just this was their excuse. So what are your initial thoughts?
Yeah, there's within my community, there's some who believe that porn has kind of helped them kind of come to terms and understand their sexuality a bit more. But what I say to that is, actually, it's distorted their sexuality. It's, like I said, pornography shows a lot of explicit, violent, degrading acts. And so that showed me, and it taught me, it groomed me to see sex as something violent and degrading. And so I thought that type of sex was normal, especially within my community. And so I totally disagree that we need to be exposed to pornography to understand as kids to understand who we are. I think that's absurd and ridiculous. Yeah.
And that's why we need, so many voices at the table as we're having these conversations with these tech companies, so that they understand they can't use these as excuses for inaction. I want to, maybe Laura, I wanted to talk to you for so long, but I wanted to share with you that one of the also common comments that we hear as we're meeting with these tech companies is that LGBTQ plus youth need community. They need a place to go to find others who are going through similar life experiences, and that is why they need to allow platforms like Discord and Reddit to remain completely unmoderated, so that these youth have places to go. And I wanted to tell you, Laura, one of my really young family members who identifies as trans found himself just so horribly exploited as he went to Discord. And he went to join a server to find community. And there he found predators. And, some of the things that we fight happens also to our own families, which is another really unfair unfair reality. But Laura, I was wondering what your thoughts are on that, like the excuse that community is
Yeah,
needed, and so
they're red herrings, right? So look, these are red herrings from these companies. So yes, absolutely, LGBTQ kids, all kids do need community, but that is not what these platforms are, right? And so COSA, and I'll just go back to COSA because it's a good example. COSA actually does not apply to nonprofits, to libraries, to other types of online internet services that are not for profits. Motivated by and engaged in exploiting our kids. So again, it's a sort of a red herring there. These are not safe communities. These are not, supportive communities these companies are providing. And when they use words like moderation and unmoderated, again, we're not talking about censorship. We're not talking about moderation. You don't need a moderator sitting in a room with every child to make these platforms safer, right? These are programming and design issues. These are stop matchmaking for drug dealers and predators. Stop sending these kids into these settings. I mean, John DeMay said something that was so, I think, important, which is if these were actual physical places, these operators would probably be in jail, right? Because of the level of danger that they're putting our kids in. And again, it's not about having some moderator sit in a room with every child. It is about the programming. It's about the algorithmic discrimination. It's about the user recommendations that these companies are operating and pushing to our kids. Those are what are causing harms, right? And it's our children are always going to make, or often, let's say, poor decisions because they're kids. But this is not about the decisions our kids are making. This is about the decision these platforms are making for our children.
Michael, I was with you. We had breakfast last week, and if you remember, I just want you to say for everyone what you were yelling about adults having access to children. If you can, oh my gosh, it was so
Yeah,
powerful.
I'll do my best. I mean, I think that, a part of being an adult in the world is ensuring that children have safe spaces for community, right? And I hope that that is in real life and digital, and we know that that doesn't happen in the digital space. And so I think that making sure that adults like Don, you told me about Instagram. I didn't even know that with Instagram, adults could direct message children and youth. And I found that pretty scandalous and awful, and didn't understand why random adults would be able to talk to children and youth on a digital platform, and don't see any reason why there should be access for random adults. I mean, this is why K through 12 schools aren't a public accommodation under the law, right? Is because random adults and random people, just random people that don't have an association with that school don't need to be there. And so I think it's our job, as adults to make sure that youth and kids have safe spaces where they can be kids, where they can grow up, and where random adults that don't need to be there and don't have a relationship with these children and aren't a part of raising them or educating them don't need to have access to them. That's just, I think, a general agreement that is true in society. At least it was when I was growing up, right? I feel like when I was a kid, I didn't grow up when the internet was a thing. And I got to be honest, I'm pretty grateful for that, because the adults that were in my life, through my family, through school, through my community, I felt really safe and protected by them. And so I hope to be that for LGBTQ youth again, because LGBTQ youth are significantly more vulnerable to bullying, to marginalization of all kinds. And I just think that it's really important that we make sure that LGBTQ youth, as a part of, this tackling this massive issue with social media and regulating relatively new technologies, that we take into consideration the safety and well-being of LGBTQ kids, and make sure that they get the same kind of chance that I had, right, growing up, to be a kid, to be safe, and to feel like the adults, and to know that the adults in their lives are there to support them, to help them grow into happy and successful adults. And so, again, I think that's our job as adults, is to support all kids and help them grow into happy and successful adults. And and make sure that people that don't need access to kids don't have them, right? Or don't have that access.
Yes.
And
Common sense. Common sense. Here.
common sense.
Okay, I'll take one or two questions, and as my colleague Lena's getting that for me, I'm going to ask all of my panelists to just imagine you're a senator tomorrow. It's the end, and you've heard all of the big tech BS. What do you want to say? What do you want to say to them? Okay, my question now is, why must the kids use these platforms? Why not just keep them off until they're at an age that's mature enough to understand what is there? Laura, I'm going to shoot that over to you initially.
It's a hard question. Look, I mean, it's why must they use these, right? I mean, these platforms, I want to be really clear, these are not the internet. When we talk about social media, these are for-profit companies that are exploiting our kids. They are not, there are plenty of resources on the internet. So at the end of the day, like, there's an argument that kids, they don't need these products. There is no great public and social utility with social media platforms. That said, it's the system we're in, right? I mean, it's and not just sort of First Amendment issues, but as a society, it is the Trojan horse where these companies have gotten these products into our schools. They've gotten them into every facet of our life. And so I do think that practically you're not just going to unring the bell on that. And so we have to work within the limits of what we have.
Yeah, thank you. How can big tech stop older people from pretending? I can't read the whole question.
It's so how can big tech stop older people from pretending to be a kid?
Yeah, Tim, you want to take that one?
Yeah. It's actually surprisingly easy because the first thing that they would be doing if they actually were going to fix this issue is they would get the equivalent of, carding everybody to make sure they're 21 or 18 before they go in the door. And you would have a certain set of rules, like if you had kids under 18 going into the facility. Just because it's a digital facility, it doesn't mean it's not a facility of some kind. And so there's been objections about the privacy, other kinds of issues, but those are, like I said, those are canards now. The technology is present and has been for a little while to be able to determine that someone is likely underage, and then to be able to get credentials through an anonymous third party that's passed over. These are things that have been done in banking, other areas for years, could have been widely and easily adopted. And if you had the ability to know the age and the identity of the identity, meaning the age identity, not necessarily the personal identity of the end person, then at that point you can create straightforward safeguards, such as underage, to non-underage person has to have certain authorization and checkpoints in order to have communication, like the sign off of a parent or a family member that's a guardian. Those are relatively straightforward. The reason they are not done is the introduction of that technology creates a little bit of friction. It creates a little bit of slowing down of what otherwise could be a rapid access and higher probabilities of connecting to people on these social networks. And the connecting to people is what drives the value of those social networks, right? The reason why kids want to have access is everyone's already on it, right? And so it's a little bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy that way, because that's what happens when you have a quasi-monopoly network of a handful of these different organizations and groups. It is not necessary. It is being done because that is what enables them to take their current monetization models and keep them stable and invest in enhancements to them. Because if you get people locked into those networks, then you have to invest all this money into the R&D of making people want to stay on and figure out what is it that makes their brain fire a certain way so that they stay on. That's like a designer drug dealer. That's like someone who knew that cocaine was this addictive, and now we want to get them on something more addictive. And then 3 generations later, you've got fentanyl, where one hit, and if it doesn't kill them, they may be hooked for years or life. And that's kind of what's happened. It's a digital narcotics industry now. It's not the tech industry. The tech industry, is a lot of other things, like the device that I'm sitting here that lets me talk to people anywhere in the world. That to me is the tech industry. We're talking about a subset of that industry, which has designed something that was not designed with safety in mind, because it would have potentially slowed down their growth and slowed down their monetization. And there was no consequences for going fast. So the Silicon Valley motto is move fast and break things. Well, they've broken a bunch of children, a bunch of human beings. And unless there is a change in the law, they will continue doing it because without liability, there will be no limits.
Thank you, Tim. I wanted to just add too that in meeting with TikTok, Instagram, and Snapchat, they've all told us that with extremely high accuracy, they can detect age lying. They know based on various numbers of data points when you're lying about being a child and when you're lying about being an adult. So knowing that, why are they still allowing this easy access? And why are we not holding them accountable? No other industry enjoys such protections. Okay, so legislation aside, as social media users, what can we each be doing and looking out for to protect youth? I'm going to pass that over to you, John, initially.
Yeah. Can I make a comment on the last part real quick, too? Because I didn't want to throw this in here. I think the biggest thing that we really need to push social media companies to do that's simple is user verification. And like you said, you have to have a driver's license to walk into a bar, to get on an airplane. If social media companies were forced to verify users, that would really eliminate all the fake accounts out there. And a lot of these folks that are victimizing people online are using fake accounts. So if they user verified, and then they also did IP address tracking. So every device has a unique IP address. Why do social media companies allow this device to go out and make 100 Instagram accounts? It should not be possible. After 2 or 3 Instagram accounts, it should lock it out, flag the thing, and figure out what's going on because it's not right. Nobody that uses it properly has 3 Instagram accounts or Facebook accounts. So IP address tracking, simple technology that's already out there. User verification, it would eliminate probably 75% of the problems that we have online right now. But that being aside, your question again.
Yes. Legislation. Policy aside, how can just regular users of social media help youth navigate these?
The social media companies themselves, how should we as parents? Well, let's stop letting our kids on the internet. Excuse me, I shouldn't say internet because that's the wrong word. The internet is a very fun place, and it's a great place, social media specifically, right? Because that's a whole different thing, a whole separate subset of technology. Like, it's not a technology problem, it's a parent problem. It really is. And I'm a parent too. I have 2 other children at home, young girls, and our girls will not be on social media in my house. And the other thing is one thing that I didn't really ever think about until our situation happened and we started diving into this is a lot of parents let their children use social media inclusively. So when you're cooking dinner and you're running around on Tuesday night and we have dance and all these things going on, you give your 14-year-old the phone and they're in their bedroom by themselves, or they're in their basement in the rooms, or they're up in their all these places where they're secluded and alone. That should never happen. So all these incidents that are happening probably in your situation and my son's situation, he's sitting in his bedroom at 2 a.m. freaking out, secluded in the dark by himself, nowhere to go, feeling crushed. And we should never let our kids in that position. So my kids will never be in their bedroom with that phone. They won't have any technology beyond the hallway of our living room anymore. If they want to be on watching YouTube or watching TV, they will be doing it in our living room in front of the family, kind of thing. So I think that's probably the biggest thing.
Jay, do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I push people to really learn about online exploitation, about human trafficking, about sextortion, and really address their biases and figure out what are myths and misconceptions, and then share that information in their circles. Everybody is at a table that we can't all be at. We all have circles of influence. And until we are protecting all children, it's really not going to be super effective for my specific children. So we have to look at the issue as a whole versus just like, what can I do in my home? Because not everybody has the privilege to be able to monitor their children's activity 24/7, or be able to restrict their access to being online and being in social media spaces. You know, I'm a single parent. I had 3 teenagers. And so me being able to go through the content of 3 people over the span of an entire day is it's actually impossible. So what's really important is that we work on ways that would protect all children. And we talk about it and we share them and we have these discussions and we continue these discussions outside of these spaces.
Lissa, do you want to add a point to this?
Yeah, I think it's really important to understand your own child and that your child might not be the same as every other child. Like some of my children, absolutely no social media, even no smartphones. We went with Gab phones for a lot longer, where other ones of my children, I was like, they can totally handle this. So I think that as a parent, it's really important to understand how your kid has interacted with technology historically, and if they're able to handle, social media. I don't really think any kid under 16 has the emotional and mental development to do it very well without parent support. But, I think it's just important to understand your own kid.
Yeah, Aaron.
Yeah, I just wanted to share. I'm a new parent, so I'm learning from you guys right now. But coming from the other side, I do want to share that it's important to make your home environment with your child a safe place, that they would feel comfortable enough to come to you if something is happening. For example, if we're talking about the LGBT situation, if they know that you might have issue with that and they're struggling with something like that online, they're not going to feel safe enough to come to you with that. And so regardless of who your child is, I think it's important that we set up the home environment to be safe, that look, these things happen, you're not going to get in trouble if you're exposed to this, just let me know and we'll figure out what we can do to keep you safe, that we just want you to be safe, because we're safe and we're going to keep you safe.
Yes, yes, yes. Friends, we have to end, and I want to give all of you just 30 seconds left to say something else. Pretend you're a senator and you're before those 5 CEOs tomorrow. What do you want to say to them? But I want to just add to this last question. It has to be policy change. We have to have across the board industry-wide change, because we as parents, like Jay was saying, no one has capacity to stay up with all the flawed tools that tech has given us. And so we don't have power as parents, and we need tech to prioritize our children's safety, to design with their safety in mind from the outset. So we can't really push the policy aside. We're trying, but we need policy too. So thank you for joining with us. All right, I'm going to go around the room. Let's see. Tim, 30 seconds. Final comments.
Yeah, I think the question we should be asking is not around just changing the status quo. We have to get a little deeper, and we have to ask these companies, what is the societal benefit they are actually providing versus the harms they're doing? And that's a similar question, I think, that led to the view in society that big tobacco and what they're doing with children, there's no way the economic benefit was worth it. And I believe that these companies are in the same bucket. We just haven't fixed the law to make it viable to do that. And so that's the part I think that's missing, is we let them often define the terms of the debate based on a lot of edge cases and hypotheticals, or the need for the perfect to be the enemy of the good. And the reason is they're winning in terms of all the way to the bank. These are trillion-dollar companies that we're talking about. And they're the wealthiest companies in history. And they've done it basically by going to the easiest path, which is exploitation. Exploitation is always the easiest path where there are no values holding you back. So that's the part that I think we have to challenge them on over and over again. Why does the status quo deserve moral equivalence when in reality it's probably doing vastly more harm than good? If we didn't have it, would things be better? And I think they have a trouble answering that, because it probably would be.
Yeah. Oh, so powerful. Michael?
But folks, really quick, I'm sorry, I have to run, so I'm going to have to log off. But I just wanted to thank you all. This is an incredible program, and I really appreciate it.
Bye, Laura. Michael, do you have final thoughts?
I do. Technology is a powerful tool, and I just have to believe that technology can use that powerfulness, that powerful tool, to safeguard everyone, especially young people, to take appropriate safety measures and design measures without infringing on free speech for adults, right? Free speech for anyone, really. And so again, I think this is where policy change is really critical, and where I think we need to engage wholeheartedly in that discussion as LGBTQ people, and how do we ensure that these safeguards are actually put into place, while also, balancing and harnessing that power for good of technology and
Yeah.
safeguard things like free speech. And I know we can do it. It's an incredible tool, and we're an amazing society, so we can make that happen.
Yes. Yes. So much hope. Jay.
Yeah, I would just say again, all children deserve these basic protections, and that somebody is holding the bag for all these profits that are being made. And right now, it is unfortunately our children, and we need tech companies to take over that liability that they have created.
Thank you. Yes. Melissa.
Okay, I would tell the senators, pass legislation. Like self-regulation does not work. We've been trying this so many times for so many years. It does not work. Please just get this legislation passed.
Yes. Aaron.
Yeah, so I'd say to both sides of the issue, please stop scapegoating my community. Please stop misusing, us. And to the one side, please don't accuse us of being the groomers, because that's totally distorting the whole issue here. We're actually more likely to be the victims. To the other side, please don't scapegoat us to say, oh, we're going to be victimized by this. Because like Laura was saying, these safe places like nonprofits and stuff can still share information, provide information for my community, but my community needs these protections. So please don't hinder the passage of any legislation to protect us trying to protect us. Does it make sense? Please don't scapegoat us.
John.
I think one thing we didn't talk about enough today is Section 230, and Section 230 needs to go away immediately. If social media companies think that their platforms are so safe and they're doing all these wonderful things that are great, then government and the people, i.e. the people, need to get rid of Section 230, and we will let that sort out in court. If they don't want to do that, then you know what? Then we have it as leverage to make serious, real change. IP address tracking. Limit fake accounts that are being used to victimize people, using age tracking, using technology to find these types of photos and different things that are happening. So there's all of the things that really have to happen that we're not doing, and we have to use Section 230 as leverage to do that. And at this point, I think they should just repeal it and let the lawsuits happen. And if they're truly doing what they need to be doing, and they say that they're doing, and the protections are actually there, then the social media companies will win the lawsuits all day long. And if they're not, they're going to go broke.
To close out, we're going to hear from Jane Doe. We're going to show a short video, 90 seconds, but really gets at exactly this. The Communications Decency Act, Section 230, is being used by these big technology companies to prevent them from doing anything. That's their biggest excuse. And we have to say no more.
Hi, I just would like everybody to know what happened to myself and my family. My son, we got a phone call to find out that my son was in his room and was suicidal. This was just devastating. He was very happy, joyful child that was involved in sports and church. He was only 13 years old at the time. We found out that the reason that he was suicidal was because he had actually been trafficked. Him and a friend had been exploited online and trafficked. The trafficker had created some pornographic child porn videos, and they were actually circulating all over Twitter. They were all over his school. They were being blasted. His friends and family were seeing these videos, and my son reached out to Twitter X now, asked for his photo ID to prove his age. He sent his driver's license, so they verified his age. Twitter, or now X, his response was, "Thank you for reaching out. We reviewed the content and we did not find a violation of our policies. So no action will be taken at this time." That's devastating as a parent. First of all, how is it not breaking any of their policies? We, after that, had filed a case. We've been fighting this fight for 3 years, only for our case to be dismissed, so that Twitter could be protected with 100% immunity under the Section 230 law. So as a parent, we're just absolutely still devastated, and we're 3 years later, and we need Congress to do something for our children and protect them.
Thank you, everyone. Join us tomorrow for the congressional hearing. It starts at 10 a.m. Eastern. You can watch it live online and use hashtag no more excuses and big tech BS to call them out with us. Thanks.